While unsolved murders are the obvious candidate for obsession and investigation, unsolved disappearances are perhaps even more haunting. These are some of the strangest and most mysterious unsolved disappearances of all time. The unsolved disappearance of the 5 Sodder children is one of the strangest vanishings ever. On Christmas Eve night, 1945, a fire broke out at the Sodder home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, and within 45 minutes, the house was destroyed. Parents George and Jeannie escaped with 4 children, but the other 5 that were in the house didn't make it out. George tried to get back in, but his ladder was mysteriously missing. He then tried to move his trucks next to the house to climb in the upper windows, but neither truck would start. Calls to the fire department weren't answered. By the new year, the coroner had issued 5 death certificates for the Sodder children. But here's the thing, there were no bodies, no bones, no remains of any kind. Signs pointed to arson and to the phone lines being cut. Looking back, George, who was an Italian immigrant originally named Giorgio Sodu, remembered a number of encounters in which he was threatened for his vocal criticism of Mussolini.
George kept his homeland secrets close to his heart, never discussing the exact motivations that pushed him out of Italy and across the pond.
The Sodders never believed the children died, as evidenced by a billboard seeking information that stood by the highway for nearly 40 years. In December 1900, a ship landed at Eilean Moor, one of the 7 Flannan Isles near Scotland, to drop off a lighthouse keeper and relieve one of the 3 currently stationed there. But there were no lighthouse keepers there to greet them. All 3, Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur, were gone, and things at the lighthouse were not right. An untouched dinner was left on the table, and a nearby chair was overturned. The clocks were all stopped, and the lamps were prepared for lighting but unlit. 2 of the 3 men's coats were missing, and the doors and gate were tightly shut. Signs pointed to the men having been gone for about a week by the time their disappearance was discovered. It was strictly against the rules for all 3 keepers to leave the lighthouse at the same time, and these were experienced men who wouldn't flout safety rules lightly. Investigators conclude they must have gone to secure a crane and been blown off a cliff or swept out to sea by an unexpected wave. And in fact, the final logs at the lighthouse did note storms so severe that the 3 seasoned mariners were crying and praying. On the other hand, there was no record anywhere else in the area of bad weather during this time period, and no bodies were ever found. The unsolved disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa might be the most infamous missing persons case in American history. Hoffa made his career working in the union business in the 1930s and 1940s, eventually becoming head of the Teamsters, the biggest labor union in the United States, in 1957. After a stint in federal prison, he was released in 1971 on the condition he ceases union activities for several years.
I'm trying to find out whose back you were going to break.
Figure of speech.
But following his release, Hoffa began to run afoul of the Chicago mob. On July 30th, 1975, he was supposed to meet mobster Anthony Provenzano at a restaurant in Detroit, and he hasn't been seen since. It's unknown what happened, but it's long been thought Hoffa was the victim of a mob assassination. According to the FBI's Hoffa's memo, among the most likely motives for the hit was Hoffa's attempted re-entry into the Teamsters, which upset the mob, who thought he couldn't be as controllable as the current president. Then there's the theory that Hoffa may have been planning on testifying against them in regard to Teamster crimes. Nobody knows what happened to Hoffa or his body, but there are some eerie hypotheses. Some think he was buried below the old Giants Stadium in New Jersey, at a New Jersey landfill, or even dismembered and shipped abroad. Hoffa was declared legally dead in 1982, but his body has never been found and his disappearance remains a mystery. Ambrose Bierce is probably the one person on this list more famous for what he did before he disappeared than for his disappearance itself. Bierce was an author famous for his cynically satirical The Devil's Dictionary, which gives definitions such as politeness, noun, the most acceptable hypocrisy. His supernatural stories include an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge and The Damned Thing. Alternatively, you might know Bierce for writing the stories that inspired Season 1 of True Detective. When you combine his penchant for cynicism and the macabre with his personal history, it's not surprising that in describing Bierce, Time wrote, "The Civil War veteran also had a morbid fascination with horror and death." This led to him deciding at age 71 to leave behind his dull life in the United States to witness Pancho Villa's Mexican Revolution in 1913. He sent his cousin a reassuring letter saying, "Goodbye. If you hear of my being stood up against the Mexican stone wall and shot to rags, please know that I think that a pretty good way to depart this life. It beats old age, disease, or falling down the cellar stairs." He was never heard from again. Some believe Bierce was killed in the 1914 siege of Ojinaga, while others believe he never went to Mexico at all but ran off somewhere and died by suicide. 17-year-old Rachel Trlica went to do some Christmas shopping on the morning of December 23, 1974, with her friend 14-year-old Lisa Renee Wilson and Wilson's 9-year-old neighbor Julie Moseley. at the new Seminary South Shopping Center in Fort Worth, Texas. According to an article on a website maintained by Trlica's brother, the girls were supposed to be home by 4 p.m., but they were never seen again. Trlica's car was found parked outside Sears, and witnesses placed the 3 girls inside the shopping center during the day. Locked inside the car were all the gifts the girls had bought, which makes it seem unlikely they would just run away. Why would you pay for your layaway before starting a new life? The last sign of the girls came in the form of a letter sent to Trlica's husband. Yes, the 17-year-old high school student was married, but this was Texas in the 1970s. And that letter read, "I know I'm going to catch it, but we just had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in Sears' upper lot. Love, Rachel." Besides the other errors in the letter, it looked as if Rachel had misspelled her own name on the first pass, and one of the numbers in the postmark was backward.
We like to not let it die until we get answers. Because this has been terrible, just absolutely terrible these 43 years.
Over 40 years later, the families had not given up hope, and they released pigeons in the girls' honor every year. According to the St. Petersburg Times, Diane Augat disappeared in April 1998 in Pasco County, Florida, and was reported missing by her mother on Good Friday of that year. In the years before her disappearance, Augat had struggled with mental illness and addiction, and according to her mother, quote, was very trusting and liked men with money. It's hard to say whether her issues or personal associations had something to do with her disappearance, but what we do know is pretty disturbing. A few days after Augat went missing, she left a message on her mother's answering machine, in which she can be heard saying, "Help, help," followed by the sounds of a scuffle and someone saying, "Hey, give me that," before hanging up. The caller ID simply said Starlight, and when Augat's mother called the number back, there was no answer. 2 days after the phone call, the tip of Augat's middle finger was found on the side of the same highway she'd last been seen walking down 5 days earlier. And a week after that, Augat's clothes were found neatly folded inside a bag placed in a convenience store freezer. According to the Charlie Project, the day after the Times reported all that in 2000, another bag was found in a different convenience store. This one a Ziploc bag full of makeup labeled Diane. The unsolved 1961 disappearance of housewife Joan Risch from her home in Lincoln, Massachusetts involves a not insignificant amount of blood, but there's a chance it's not the result of a tragedy. As reported by the Boston Globe, on the afternoon of October 24, 1961, Risch's 4-year-old daughter went to a neighbor and said, "Mommy is gone and the kitchen is covered with red paint." The paint was actually Risch's blood. Police found the telephone ripped out of the wall and a bloody fingerprint that's never been identified. The blood trailed into the driveway, but no body or weapon was ever found. Further investigation led the police to Risch's borrowing history at the local library. It seems she had checked out 25 books that summer, most on a similar theme: unexplained disappearances. These books included one called Into Thin Air about a woman who went missing, leaving behind only blood smears and a towel. On September 24, 2005, Michelle Vanek and her longtime hiking partner tackled the arduous Mount of the Holy Cross, a 14er, or a mountain over 14,000 feet in elevation near Vail, Colorado. Early in the hike, Vanek seemed to be suffering from dehydration and altitude sickness, leaving her unable to continue, so Vanek headed back while her partner reached the summit. They had plans to meet up on the route down, but things went horribly wrong. Local authorities think Vanek missed a trail she meant to take by just 100 yards and instead took a rougher path into an area known as Angelica Couloir, which was basically a dead end. When they didn't meet up, rescue teams scoured the mountain for weeks, but sub-freezing temperatures combined with a snowstorm and they never found her.
The largest search in state history failed to turn up a single clue.
It wasn't until 18 years later that any trace emerged. In 2022, hikers found a boot in the couloir and forensic analysis determined it was hers. Based on the evidence, it's believed that Vanek froze to death alone on the mountain as rescue crews searched for her nearby.
She did exactly what her hiking partner told her to do.
The boot shows she went to an area not searched in 2005 until the last day.
The difference between life and death may have just been a couple of yards, but we'll never know Vanek's ultimate fate. The chilling story of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 begins just after midnight on March 8, 2014, when the aircraft took off from Kuala Lumpur headed for Beijing. On board were 239 souls, including passengers and crew, and everything seemed normal during takeoff. However, things took a dark turn at 1:21 a.m. It's unknown exactly what transpired in the cockpit, but the plane inexplicably stopped sending signals to air traffic controllers and disappeared. The Malaysian military's radar showed the plane flipping around to head southwest toward the deep of the Indian Ocean, but eventually lost it. It communicated a keep alive signal for several hours after it left radar, but never relayed a final location.
What we can confirm is that the aircraft is no longer flying. It will have It's either at an airfield somewhere or it has crashed, but it's run out of fuel.
It's thought that the plane made it roughly 400 miles before running out of fuel and crashing into the ocean, but that's far from definitive. Search crews combed the area. Within 2 years, they'd covered more than 45,000 square miles, but no significant trace of the plane has ever shown up. The government's official report offered no concrete conclusions. Most people blame pilot Zahari Ahmad Shah or co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid, but that's only speculation.
It's all consistent with somebody who wanted to simply vanish from the face of the earth and make sure that the ultimate crash site was never found.
Could the plane have been hijacked, or was there a mechanical failure? Did the 237 people outside the cockpit realize they were headed to their deaths? We'll likely never know. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan might just be the most talked about unsolved disappearances in American history. In 1937, Earhart and Noonan set off on an attempt to fly around the world, but they never completed the journey. They began on May 20th, 1937 in Oakland. Just over a month later, all that was left was to cross the Pacific Ocean from Southeast Asia back to California, and they were finished. Earhart and Noonan departed from Papua New Guinea on July 2nd, aiming to land 2,500 miles away at Howland Island. However, when they were seemingly close, she cryptically radioed the Coast Guard that they were low on fuel and disoriented. The world never heard from Earhart or Noonan again. The U.S. Navy conducted a massive search effort, but even after looking more than 250,000 miles around Howland, they never found a trace. It's thought that the aviators couldn't locate Howland and circled around until they ran out of fuel, finally crashing into the ocean. It's hard to imagine their feelings as the fuel gauge dwindled while they desperately searched for any sign of the island. Without bodies, we'll never know their ultimate fate. October 21st, 1978 was the last time the world heard the voice of pilot Frederick Valentich, and what he said is still confusing and slightly terrifying today. He was flying a Cessna 182L from Moorabbin to King Island in Australia, but upon his approach to King Island, things turned strange. Valentich radioed to air traffic controllers that a large unidentified flying object was flying circles above him, almost as if it was taunting him. According to Valentich's transmissions, the UFO went from flying at extreme speed to standing still, had weird shiny and metallic lights on it, and even briefly vanished. After tracking it for just a short period, Valentich's engine started to falter. After relaying a final transmission saying the UFO was directly above him, Valentich's radio stopped communicating and was never reactivated. Valentich had vanished. Authorities searched the area for any signs of Valentich's plane or the UFO, but found no aircraft and no body.
Mr. Valentich, what do you believe has happened to Frederick?
He must have been struck with certain unidentified object.
According to Skeptical Inquirer, it's likely Valentich approached Kings Island when he saw the celestial lights of several planets and a star, which he may have mistaken as UFO lights. As he became disoriented, he may have stopped paying attention to his instrumentation and started careening towards the ocean. However, that theory is in no way definitive. We'll never know what was really going on inside Valentich's plane that night, or where he ended up, but hopefully he stayed on his planet. For more than 65 years, the mystery of the ship, the MV Joyita, has confused and befuddled many. The Joyita set sail on October 3, 1955, heading out from western Samoa to the Tokelau Islands. The ship had 25 people on board, including crew, but when it was found a month later, it was completely deserted. It was finally located adrift nearly 600 miles in the wrong direction by a passing merchant vessel, the Tuvalu. When the Tuvalu's crew boarded Joyita, they found the ship empty of life, as well as of lifeboats, rafts, food, except a refrigerator full of meat, ship's logs, a sextant, radios, compasses, or anything useful. It's unclear why the passengers left the ship, although engine failure could have left them floating helplessly at sea. Other theories include pirates, a collision with a larger boat, or being thrown overboard by an earthquake. The most logical speculation is that the engine was taking on water, leaving those on board no chance but to abandon the ship. They may have believed help was on the way, opting to wait in the lifeboats and rafts for rescuers who would never come. No trace of the Joyita's passengers or crew has ever turned up, and their fate is still unknown. The early 1950s was a tense time for the United States. It was the height of the Cold War, and there were widespread fears the Soviet Union was going to obliterate everyone with a nuclear weapon, putting the entire military and defense system on edge.
We must be ready every day, all the time, to do the right thing if the atomic bomb explodes.
One particular incident from November 23, 1953 still stands out 7 decades later. The mysterious case of First Lieutenant Felix Moncla and Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson of the U.S. Air Force. That night, Moncla and Wilson were sent to investigate a radar blip near the Canadian border at Lake Superior and never returned. After seemingly catching up with it, both Moncla and Wilson's aircraft, along with the blip, vanished from radar without a trace. After a search of the area, neither Moncla, Wilson, nor their F-89 could be found anywhere.
Ground control released a statement. The jet was followed by radar until it merged with an unknown object.
What makes this really creepy is the Air Force's contradictory explanations. At first, they said the two vanished from radar, before later saying they crashed into the lake after successfully completing their mission. To further complicate things, the existence of the Canadian aircraft they said was intercepted was officially denied by the Canadian government, and the Air Force deleted the case files before an investigation could take place. So what happened to Wilson and Moncla, and what were they tracking? The possibilities are endless and range from normal, like a case of vertigo leading to a crash, to horrifying, like the presence of extraterrestrials. The dark story of Anthonette Cayedito's disappearance is as disturbing as it is tragic. Cayedito was just a 9-year-old girl when she disappeared without a trace on April 6, 1986, from her home in Gallup, New Mexico. Sometime very early in the morning, a stranger knocked on the door to the family's apartment. With her mother asleep, Cayedito decided to answer it herself, and it's believed that she was kidnapped. As soon as she discovered her daughter was missing, Cayedito's mother called the police, who initiated a manhunt of the area, but it was unsuccessful and the trail went cold. A year later, a young girl identifying herself as Cayedito called the local police department. She said she'd been kidnapped and was still in the States, then abruptly hung up after being scolded by an angry male voice. But it's unclear to authorities how authentic the phone call really was.
A mother knows, and I know that was her.
Even 30 years later, the case is still considered open and active by Gallup police, although there have been no recent leads. In 2023, the FBI released an age-progressed photo of Cayedito, but to date, her disappearance remains unsolved.